Avni at the hands of her mother is subjected to, as we've discussed, some terrible abuse. And actually, although Avni is not the same with Nick, there's definitely a complicated relationship between them as well, right? And what I loved was the way in which the way that you could see that Avni is as a parent, she is the product of her own upbringing.
Yeah.
And was that, I mean, because it was so effortlessly done. And I guess my question is, how did you manage to achieve that? Was it intentional, or was it something where you kind of, in the edit, you were like, okay, I need there to be a thread here, or was that just how it came out?
So that's, yeah, I think the reason why it came out the way it did, and it feels quite in your, in your words, like smooth. I don't actually think that's what you said. What did you say?
Effortless.
Effortless, that was it. It feels quite effortless, is because it took me so long to write the thing. So like I started writing this in 2018, and these characters were with me for like a good 3 or 4 years up until the final manuscript was done. And I think because they were with me for so long, I really got to know them. And to talk a little bit more about that and to tie it back to your question, for example, the scene that I think with Avni and her mother that everyone talks to and refers to is the horrific scene sort of halfway through the book,
Yeah.
where we see her mother physically and very much emotionally and mentally abusing her. And it's it was a very difficult scene to write, and it's still a difficult scene to read back. And it's the first time I'd ever written anything sort of even semi-violent, ever. And I wrote that scene because I wanted to understand more about the exact nuances and details of what was going on between those two characters. When I first wrote the book, I knew that there was abuse there. I knew that Avni was, like you said, a product of her past and was doing her best not to like put the same things onto her son. But of course, sometimes when we parent, we try our best to do the opposite of what happened to us, but then by definition, we go too far in other ways.
Yeah.
And we do other things that aren't ideal. And which parent is ideal,
Absolutely.
But with Avni, like I very much wrote that scene because I'm part of like a workshop group where we like read each other's work and provide feedback. And I think someone had said to me, we need to see really what's going on between these two characters. And I wrote this scene, and it was never meant to be in the book. But when I gave it to my friends to read, they were like, this is incredibly powerful, like it needs to be in there. And it's still now, I think, literally the only scene in the whole thing that's barely been edited from like when I first wrote it.
And you didn't mean for it to be in the book.
No, I just wanted to get to know them. There's so much of the novel, there's so many scenes and conversations between characters that I wrote that never made it through, but I needed to know I needed to write those scenes and explore those moments within the characters to then make them feel rounded and whole. And often lots of the scenes that I omitted, like there's lots of really tender scenes between Rohan and Nick when Nick's a kid. I summarize them in one line, very like potent one lines in other chapters. But within those lines, there's so much detail that I know. Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely. Is that so? I must say, I've not. I've come across lots of writers that have written a bunch of stuff that gets edited out, me being one of them, and then thinking, oh, there goes that weekend that I spent writing that entire chapter. But I haven't come across, and I think it's remarkable, the idea of saying, actually, this isn't going to be in the book, but I'm doing this because I need to know my characters even better than I do now.
Yeah. And I think this book is like,
From?
yeah, and it is like a very character-driven book. It's
Absolutely, yeah.
very much character-driven. And, the plot only really starts going about halfway through. Like the first half is very much just a slow getting to know the family and sitting within like the aftermath of their grief and stuff.